Hello and welcome to ANC Decides, the show that gives you up-to-the-minute reports, commentary and analysis building up to the elective conference. I'm your host, Mfundo Mabalani. Here's what's making headlines today. The nominations window for the December conference has finally closed. However, some branches failed to meet the requirements to send delegates, which might influence the outcome of the conference. Dispute over ANC presidential candidate Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma's KZN branch continues. Branch claims its support for Cyril Ramaphosa led to the provincial leadership's decision to disband the branch. And ANC veterans conclude National Consultative Conference with bold resolutions for the party. Veterans call on President Jacob Zuma to resign with immediate effect for allegedly violating the Constitution. The Eastern Cape ANC top brass has managed to conclude about 90% of branch nominations despite some challenges. The newly elected leadership says it can do better if granted an extension. Nomusa Pungula filed this report for us.
The Eastern Cape has successfully held over 90% of their branch general meetings, but the Provincial Executive Committee says it can reach the 100% threshold if the ANC can extend the deadline.
The report that we received from the coordinators and regional secretaries is almost 90% of the work that has been done, constituting approximately 520 of the 591 branches that are expected from the Eastern Cape to attend the national conference. So we are happy with that particular progress. In case the ANC decides to give a leeway that there could be a further time given to branch general meetings to reconvene, then I think we'll do it 100%.
We had problems around Amatole, that delayed to do BGMs, Nelson Mandela, Job Cab. Same story we had moving towards the provincial conference, creating all fusses, issues of administrators, stories that are really not existing. But with the intervention that we had, DSG came down with the Comrade Mbalula going to Nelson Mandela, DSG going to Job Gabi and Amatole, trying to help to resolve issues which were not really issues, so to speak. Branches wanted to convene their branches, but the RSC was actually a stumbling block.
The PEC has only been in office for just over a month, but it has had to deal with preparations for the national conference and a looming court case that it says should be dealt with by the NEC Appeals Committee.
The same appeal that is taken to court for a review by the courts of the law is still the same matters that are before the National Executive Committee, National Appeals Committee, as led by Comrade Spundebele, that will be descending to Eastern Cape as of today. Now, the same people, the same content is taken to court. Now, it means people are not sure about what route to take in order to deal with organizational matters. It's almost a matter of ill discipline.
The PEC is operating as a functional provincial leadership structure despite the court challenge. It remains confident that the ANC will emerge as the victor at the national conference. With Nomusa Pungula for ANN7, Bisho, Eastern Cape.
We now cross over to our reporter Nomusa Pungula, who's out in the Eastern Cape. Nomusa, warm welcome to you. Interesting to also see there Oscar Mabuyane seeming to really be taking on his role as chair of that province. It seems they continue to function irrespective of that court challenge that they're facing at this point.
Good evening, Fundo, and good evening to our viewers. Indeed, the current PEC in the Eastern Cape is quite confident that it is at its rightful place. It was elected legally, and also it says it is confident that this court case is not going to delay them, or it's not going to hinder anything that needs to be done in the ANC office. But also interestingly, Nomfundo, when we attended the lecture yesterday of the celebration of Victoria, as well as Griffith Mxenge, one of the ANC heroes here in the Eastern Cape who passed on 37 years ago, Oscar Mabuyane mentioned that they are going to make sure that they still try to work with those that are still aggrieved in terms of the processes that took place in the conference that took place in October. However, when we were listening closely to the ANC Youth League giving a message of support to that particular lecture, they mentioned that as the ANC Youth League, they do not want two centers of power, highlighting that they are going to make sure that Oscar Mabuyane, as the chairperson of the province, takes his position at the legislature, which now poses a question, Fundo, whether the current Premier Phumulo Masualle will continue being the Premier of the Eastern Cape until 2019, or the ANC in the Eastern Cape, particularly the Youth League, will now move for Premier to be removed so that Oscar Mabuyane can take over, as they believe that they cannot have a provincial chairperson that is not in government. But going back now to the BGMs, Mfundo, the secretary mentioned that they have managed to successfully hold 90% of the BGMs, which gives them roughly about 550 delegates that can be confirmed that they are indeed going to the conference. However, they say that should the ANC decide to give them an extension, then they are confident that they will be able to sit for all the other BGMs or all the other region and branches that have not set, so that they are able to come up with that 648 delegates that they have been allocated by the national office, which, Mfundo, interestingly, the secretary says that as the province, they are disputing that number. They believe that they should have been allocated more delegates based on the branches that they have here in the Eastern Cape, as well as the membership that they have in the Eastern Cape, that they say it was audited. However, it is now too late for them to dispute the number of delegates that they have been allocated for. But also interestingly for the Eastern Cape, Mfundo, is that they believe that they can still make sure that the ANC comes out united at the elective conference. They believe that all the leaders of the African National Congress are qualifying in their own accord. There is no one who is above the other. As much as they preferred Cyril Ramaphosa to be elected as the president of the African National Congress, however, they still believe that Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma can work very closely with Cyril and be able to rebuild the African National Congress and make sure that they put the African National Congress in a position which South African citizens wants it to be at. They say that they are not going to look much into slates. However, they are going to look at people that are leaders in the African National Congress that can work together and be able to unite the African National Congress. Hence, Oscar Mabuyane also mentioned that there are some branches that are nominating people like Comrade Matthew Sposa and all the other comrades that have been mentioned, and those that are running for the presidential
thank you very
race.
much for that report. We'll talk as days progress. Now, today in studio, we're joined by political analyst Kim Heller as well as Oliver Dixon. Panel, welcome to the both of you. Now, Kim, perhaps to start with you, an interesting picture that's being painted there in the Eastern Cape. Now, possibly the Youth League saying they cannot have two centers of power. You've got Phumulo Masualle, who's still the premier in the province, and then you've got Oscar Mabuyane, who's now the chair. What is your take there? Do you foresee them possibly recalling now the premier?
Hi, thank you. Nice to be with you today. I don't think that they're going to recall him, and I don't think that if they do, it's going to affect the outcome of the election very, very much at the moment. What we're seeing with the lion's share of the voting nominations in now, I think we've got quite a firm pattern of what is going to happen, although that's obviously indicative rather than definitive as a yardstick of support for the next presidential candidate. I think what is coming out, but I'm not sure if it's being exercised in practice, is listening to all your regions. They're speaking a lot about unity, but I'm not sure that we're seeing much unity in practice across our provinces and across our branches. And one has to ask whether the delegates that we're going to see in December are the true voice of the delegates on the ground across some of the provinces, because we're getting a lot of reports of imposition of candidates in various regions and intimidation. And I think that doesn't bode well for democracy. So as we're getting a firm pattern of the voting support, we're also getting a pattern of some disruption and disorder, and that's going to contaminate, I think, the final result that we see in December.
Oliver, your take on the dynamics in the Eastern Cape? They're sending the third largest delegation, I think 648 to be exact. So your take there, and especially because they seem to be in support of the Deputy President, Cyril Ramaphosa.
It's not unusual that the head of a party in a province or the chairperson of a party in a province is not necessarily the premier of the province. That's not an unusual thing. Importantly, it then needs to be asked, where does the real influence come from? And oftentimes the influence comes from the PEC that's standing and not so much from the premier that's standing. That's because the PEC would have most recently won a provincial elective conference. So those are people who are much closer to delegates, much closer to branches on the ground, speaking to them because they've spoken to them to win that election. Importantly, that means that the Eastern Cape needs to, one, find unity amongst themselves before they can ask for unity within the national executive, with the national elective conference. Importantly, what that means for the National Elective Conference, however, is that a province so divided in direction can vote in different directions. That's to say, branches won't necessarily vote in unison in the same direction because the province is not a monolith. The province is not uniform. There are branches who exercise their agency and who exercise their autonomy in that they can vote in the direction they see fit. And that's the true practice of democracy.
Now, you say it wouldn't be unusual for a premier not to also be the chairperson. I know we see it in KwaZulu-Natal, where Sihle Zikalala is the chair, but Willis Mkhunu happens to be the premier. But what some would then say that in that instance, you cannot deny that they come from one faction or school of thought, because these were a team when we saw Senzo Mkhunu actually being recalled at that time. So would you say that even though you don't go on to be a chair as well as a premier, but you would come from the same slate, so to say?
Not necessarily. Look, different people support different slates. Look, there's a dispute in the Free State about who Thabo Manyoni is supporting versus who is AC supporting. And that's because these debates are allowed to take place. The incumbent is often going to support a different ideology than the successor. And it's important that we recognize those differences because each new administration that's coming in is coming in with new ideas. It's coming in with fresh leadership, with things that are most related and
but in the Thabo Manyoni instance, you're talking about a leadership that's now coming to the end of its term, so to say. So you have them differing now on who they prefer. Thabo might possibly, as it's being said, prefers Cyril Ramaphosa, whereas the chair there, Ace Magashule, prefers NDZ, it seems, at this point.
Yes.
But now when we're talking about Sihle Zikalala and Willis Mkhunu, at the time when they came in, they were part of the same camp, so to say.
Yeah,
so if one decided that, no, I don't want to be the premier, I'll take on a position as MEC, but you can be the premier. That's the case. So with them in the Eastern Cape coming in now, they're saying they don't want the two centers of power.
Yeah, just because, and this is, I think, the myth we need to clear up, just because the chairperson of the party in the province is not the premier of the province doesn't mean that there's two centers of power. It just means that an elective conference in the province took place before a national election took place where we will be appointing new premiers. That's all that it means. It means there's a difference in administrative processes.
Okay. No, fair enough. We can now move over to the Northwest. Now, the Northwest province has made significant progress in concluding its branch general meetings. The province now boasts an impressive 93% of BGMs concluded in preparation for the National Elective Conference. Northwest now only has 7% of BGMs to conclude if the ANC allows an extension of the nomination period. The ANC had given provinces that were lagging behind until last weekend to conclude meetings where nominations are made. Now, failing to conclude BGMs results in a branch not sending a delegate to the all-important elective conference. It now remains to be seen if provinces like the Northwest will be granted their wish for an extension.
Here in Bujanala, we had a peaceful and successful BGMs. About 90% of BGMs were successful. We are having almost 141 branches. We are currently left with only 13 branches, which if the national can extend to us, we can ensure that all of them go through and we go with 100% to the national conference.
As a province, we are given 538 delegates. So at this moment in time, we are there at about 500, plus minus 500 delegates thus far, that for BGMs that went through. So all the outstanding, we are working on them. Before the end of this week, we'll be done with them.
538 delegates have been allocated to the province, while 93% of branch general meetings and branch annual general meetings have taken place. The remaining are still to go through. For ANC Decides, Tiama Mauta by the Northwest.
We now cross over to our reporter Tiamo out in the Northwest. Tiamo, a warm welcome to you. What's the latest now in terms of the BGMs? I know that they're seeking some sort of an extension.
Yes, Nomfundo, good evening to you and to the viewers at home. What we've heard over is that the BGMs that have taken place in the province conclude about 93%. Thus, they are asking for an extension so that they can get at least a 7% that is outstanding, so that they go through as 538 delegates to the National Elective Conference. That's what we've been hearing. But as you said, Nomfundo, they are actually having a discussion on the disputes as well that they have been having in the Bujanala district. But so far, what we've heard is that they will actually go to the National Elective Conference as 100% concluding to this week.
Well, thank you very much for that update. We'll speak to you as days progress. Panel, Kim, it seems they're also now pleading for some sort of an extension. Do you see this happening?
I think an extension should be granted because the voice of the branches needs to be loud and clear in December. And I think not allowing an extension will probably just fuel further tensions. But I think anything can change now, so let's accommodate that. I think we've learned this week through the events in Zimbabwe that a week is a very long time in politics. And it's difficult to call exactly what's going to happen in December now. I think all political analysts were humbled by what we're seeing over the last few weeks. It's quite interesting that both Ramaphosa's camp and Dlamini Zuma's camp are very, very confident in the Northwest area. But I sense there's a lot of bravado at the moment and a lot of what is a traditional war talk, rallying troops and support. And I think in provinces like that, which are very important, let's give branches the benefit of the doubt and see them come with 100% original and unsolicited support in December.
Now, Oliver, your take, I mean, you mentioned the unity issue, that a number of them are talking about unity, but you're seeing very little of it. If we had to go to what we saw happening in Mpumalanga, the two front runners were in Mpumalanga this past weekend, and we know the premier there, or the chair of the ANC, David Mabuza, has been preaching unity. But what does this unity mean if we're talking about an unopposed election of a leader? Because many of us remember what happened in 2012. Kgalema Motlanthe went there. He was an independent candidate, and many say he knew he was going to lose, but it was just to affirm that need for contest. That's what he went in to do.
You know, the unity discussion in the ANC right now is an incredibly difficult conversation. This is because the two candidates we're speaking of are ideologically diametrically opposed in terms of policy direction and ideology direction. Language has come closer together over the last couple of days, especially over the weekend, but it's still a very different direction. It seems that Cyril Ramaphosa's sort of policy drive draws inspiration from the NDP and draws inspiration from previous things that has worked for the economy or previous things that have been implemented unsuccessfully so or successfully so. And he seems to want to focus on strengthening that. There are a few different ideas based on past experience. So that's to say that he now considers the land question much more strongly. But Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma seems to drive quite strongly away from the National Development Plan, but drive towards ANC resolutions that were drawn up in Mangaung, saying that radical economic transformation has been part of the ANC's policy for a long time, at least part of the ANC's identity and the ANC's fiber. Now it's important to now drive it because a resolution was made on that in Mangaung, and she seems to want to drive that. Importantly, can these two candidates work together, given that they are so far diametrically opposed in terms of ideology? I think not. I think we would have a government that doesn't quite know in which direction it's going if one were to be the chairperson or the president and one would be to be the deputy. So it's either we're going to have Cyril Ramaphosa and no Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, or we're going to have Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma and no Cyril Ramaphosa. I think the difference here is the silence of Didi Mabuza is a bit uncomfortable at the moment, but I think he can be the deciding factor in terms of direction.
We need to come back to the chairperson there, and what many have said is somewhat of an enigma at this point. Now on to KwaZulu-Natal. The dispute over Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma's branch continues. Branch members claim the branch was disbanded because they support Cyril Ramaphosa, but the PC disagrees. Patrice Amfuyo filed this report for us.
As the ANC elective conference draws closer, aggrieved ANC branches in KwaZulu-Natal went to the provincial offices with the hope that their disputes will be heard. The National Dispute Committee, led by Naledi Pandor, will be overseeing the process and will be looking at least 50 disputes.
The business.
Some who attempted to convene their BGMs could not satisfy the quorum. Well, they are looking into the dispute that were sent direct to National, which we are told there are about 50.
Ward 32 is one of the branches which were not able to hold their branch general meeting. And according to the regional secretary, Bekinduli, the branch didn't follow proper processes for it to hold the BGM.
If you are going to have a BGM, the PEC must write a letter to the region. In Ward 32, we did not receive any letter. We were not aware that they were convening a BGM.
Sian Njokwenu from Ward 32 has rubbished these claims by Bekinduli, saying their branch did submit a letter to the regional office. Njokwenu says this is just sabotage by the region as they hold a different view because they support Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa.
What Comrade Bekinduli is saying is lies because we had written to the regional office. We know that deliberately the region is sidelining us, just like they've done previously so, in making sure that we do not attend the national conference of the ANC because we hold a different view that does not support their mandate.
Ward 32 is Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma's branch. Even though Dlamini Zuma is a member of the branch, Njokwenu says the last time she visited was last year in August. Njokwenu hopes that when they eventually have the BGM, she will be present and support Ramaphosa.
Unfortunately, the last time we saw Comrade Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma in our branch was during the 3rd of August last year, 2016. She has not come to engage the leadership of the branch or even members of the ANC within the branch.
The delegation from the national office includes Naledi Pandor, Mcebisi Skwacha, Susan Shabangu, Tony Yengini, Thula Sinqisi, Sisintombela, and Kawone Maite Mashabane. This branch says the National Disputes Committee, led by Naledi Pandor, is their only hope at the moment, as they feel that the ANC PEC has let them down. For ANN7, I'm Patrice Amfuyo in Durban.
Kim, your take on Ward 32? We've been reporting on it quite extensively. There seems to be a lot of issues there. And we've now got a branch that possibly won't exercise its right. If it prefers Cyril, I mean, they should still be allowed to go and exercise their right, but it seems there's a problem there. What's going on?
Well, absolutely. I think you know by now that I'm a strong advocate for the voice of the branch member, and they have every right to vote for Cyril Ramaphosa if that is the preference of the branch, and they must not be imposed upon. As I'm watching that clip, I feel quite miserable because I think that in the politics of the person that we're seeing in this conference, that the policy of the ANC may be a casualty of this whole process. And people are not rallying around policy. They're dividing across personal divisions. And that's going to be problematic not only in December, but as we head towards 2019.
Oliver, your take, just in brief, on the issues plaguing the Ward 32 there?
I mean, it's branches are entitled to ask for leaders to come and engage them. There's so many branches of the ANC across this country that it's almost impossible for a candidate to get to all of them. So I don't think we should place blame on Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma and say she's an unengaging person who doesn't want to speak to branches, because there's just so many branches to actually go and speak to, so much so that they wouldn't be able to speak to all branches.
But the
I
accusations
do, however,
right
think
now, the accusations where they're saying that they have been sidelined because of their preference, where they are preferring Cyril Ramaphosa.
I think, however, and importantly, campaigning is a strategic, project. You don't go branch where you don't go campaign where you know you stand very little chance of winning, right? You solidify your base by going to your base immediately in the places where you are most favorable. Then you go on to places where there are fence sitters and you convince them over to your side. Don't go playing in areas where you know you stand very little chance of winning, because you're wasting energy, time, and resources over there. So I do think that if Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma determined by herself that I stand no chance, she's justified in not going there at all.
No, I hear your point. Now, today's poll question is, can dialogue with business bring about radical economic transformation? We'd like to get your views. The answer we're seeking is yes or no, so send us your response or your answers rather on our media platforms that appear on your screen right now. And that's where we end today's show. Until next time.